Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all from wherever you're joining us from. Big thank you for joining today's session on the Digital Transformation Collaborative, mobilizing coordinated cooperative partnerships to advance national visions for transformation in education. Before we begin today's session, I just want to say a big thank you to the OECD and the OECD Center for Educational Research and Innovation for inviting the DTC, the Digital Transformation Collaborative, to participate in today's webinar and in the launch celebrations of the Digital Education Outlook 2023. Before passing the floor to the Director of the Division for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems, Mr. Boren Chakroun, to kick off our session, I would like to introduce each of our panelists joining us today. So when I introduce you, please feel free to turn on your camera. So first, Dr. Ahmed Daher, Deputy Minister for Technological Development from the Ministry of Education and the Government of Egypt. Dr. Zora Yarmesh, Program Director of Sustainability and Corporate Responsibility from Ericsson. Ms. Joelle Armando, Director of Client Experience from Anthology, and Mr. William Florence, Head of Strategic and Government Initiatives from Google. So without further ado, Boren Chakroun, the director again of the Division of Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO, who's really steering a lot of the digital transformation collaborative work, will tell us a little bit about the framing of this session and why collaborative partnerships are so important for the advancement of digital education for inclusion and equity in education more broadly. So Boren, over to you. Seems Boren might have some issues
He's
connecting.
still not connected, Juliet, so we might have to come back to Boran.
Okay, no problem. I can kick us off then. So let me share my screen. Great. So the Digital Transformation Collaborative. I'm just going to first paint a sort of overall picture of why this conversation happened, where it started, where it came from, and what the Digital Transformation Collaborative is. So first, it's really important to remember that this is becoming, in the international community, a growing global priority. And the international community is working towards the Global Digital Compact at the Future Summit in 2024. And if we look at the national commitments at the Transforming Education Summit, which happened last year in 2022, we see that digital learning comes out really at the forefront of countries' priorities. There were actually 119 national commitments at the Transforming Education Summit to digital transformation and learning. If we break those down, we see that there are three areas really of priority: digital learning itself, connectivity, and digital regulation. So when we looked at that, the Transforming Education Summit was framing digital transformation education with three C's: content, capacity, and coordination, and connectivity. And so when we looked at that, we realized that we needed actually to expand our framing and understand that these problems and these challenges were larger systemic issues. So this is the reason for the existence and the creation of the Digital Transformation Collaborative. So the challenges that we were really trying to solve are the fact that pilots are small scale and difficult to sustain. So how can we scale successful projects sustainably? We have to coordinate with governments to sustain and bring projects to national scale. We also realize that when looking at this landscape, there are many global and regional initiatives going on around digital technology and education transformation. It's very difficult for not only the international community, but also governments themselves to make sense of all of these moving parts. How are they related? How can they keep track? So the DTC has brought all of these together to frame them under the same umbrella of digital transformation and education using our framework. And we are connecting the various international initiatives like GIGA and gateways to ensure that they're coordinated. We also know that in-kind partner contributions are limited in duration, and we saw this a lot again during COVID when we were able to mobilize the Global Education Coalition, mobilized a lot of in-kind partnerships to support the continuation of education throughout school closures. But we realized that those often had a time limit. So how do we make sure that these partnerships are long-lasting? And so we've actually also mobilized expertise in financial engineering and intersectoral planning through the DTC to make sure that we're keeping these partnerships geared towards sustainability and long-term lasting. We also know that digital transformation is costly and resource intensive. So how can we pay for a national plan if it exceeds our domestic education budget? We know that the fraction of budgetary constraints for digital transformation are usually a very small portion of an already small education budget. So how do we make sure that we can mobilize partner collaboration and advise in one voice for the efficient use of resources? So here's how the DTC came to be. It offers coordination and collaboration with governments. We've developed a framework and expertise in change management and financial engineering. And we've also, as I said, mentioned mapped out the synergies between relevant global initiatives. And really, the reason that we need this is that we need to work across sectors and stakeholders to build trust and unlock these sustainable, scalable partnerships. So in order to do this, we realized that when we got the partners around the table, and just to mention, the DTC is a subgroup of the 200 partners of the Global Education Coalition. When we got these partners, some 20 or 30 around the table, and asked, what is digital transformation in education? We realized that each of the partners had their own blueprint. And so we needed to be able to understand what we were talking about and agree on what we were talking about. So that required a big chunk of work, which we dedicated last year to creating this framework. So this is the 5 C's framework. And again, as I mentioned from the Transforming Education Summit, we had content, connectivity, and capacity, and we've expanded that to also include these important C's of coordination and leadership and cost and sustainability. So I will briefly touch upon each of these, but as you can see on the screen, we've started with coordination and leadership at the top for a reason. It's this sort of lighthouse direction, this vision and goals, but that's also touching on everything around governance and management and evidence-informed decision-making. Then, after having a plan, you obviously need to be able to finance that plan. So we go into cost and sustainability to ensure that we have the budgetary allocations and a stable and secure funding to actually achieve and realize that vision. Then we go into connectivity and infrastructure, which is, of course, this foundation. You cannot achieve digital learning, digital transformation without the actual structures to support it. But we're not just talking about hardware and software. We're also looking beyond and thinking of electricity, internet access, and the actual learning spaces that are able to support all of these systems. Then we go into capacity and culture. As we know, digital transformation education is really all about people, and UNESCO has been very concrete about the human-centered approach of all of this. And so we are focusing very much on the capacity and culture, the future-ready skills, teachers and leaders skills, and including the local community and the wider community. Then finally, we touch on content and curriculum. And this is not only about the platforms, but about the flexible learning pathways that are able to accommodate learners of different ages, of different education trajectories, with flexible pedagogical models and assessment. So there's our 5C framework. And as I said, we've mapped this framework to the existing initiatives across the 5Cs. So if we look at coordination and leadership, again, we're looking at the broader institutional agenda for the Global Digital Compact. But we also have, obviously, with connectivity and infrastructure, we're looking at the GIGA initiative and UNESCO and UNICEF's Gateways to Public Digital Learning, which is all about, again, high quality, free and public digital learning platforms. Just to give a few notes on the DTC influence over the past year, this framework has already now appeared in a number of really important high-level discussions. So the G20 actually endorsed this framework in its education policies and programs report from last year as the framing for the analysis of countries' initiatives on tech-enabled learning. We've also seen the DTC, the 5Cs framework in the Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development's report on the transformative potential of data for learning. And it's appeared from our partners as well in various presentations throughout the past year. One of the DTC work strands is actually, again, digging into that cost and sustainability key. So we've looked at the financial models that exist. We've actually mapped the different financial engineering mechanisms from around the world, and we have a financial resource pack, which I'll post in the chat, to be able to investigate where different financial engineering case studies have happened and what they were essentially dedicated to. So we've mapped them to the 5 Cs, and that provides a really interesting point of reference if you're looking for how that financial engineering, that mixture of in-kind, domestic, financial, and innovative funding has been able to actually be realized in various contexts. So what next? And this is a great transition to our conversation today. We actually have our first pilot workshop of the DTC this upcoming weekend on Sunday and Monday in Egypt. And I'm very, very pleased to have Dr. Daher, again, the Deputy Minister for Technological Development from the Ministry of Education of Egypt, today to talk to us a little bit about this partnership and why it's so important for Egypt. And we also have in the coming year various events. So if you're joining us today and you'd like to get in touch and learn more about the DTC, please do. So with that, I would love to turn it over to Dr. Ahmed Daher, again, Deputy Minister for Technological Development from Egypt. And Dr. Daher, given all of this framework, the 5 Cs, could you tell us a little bit about Egypt's digital transformation journey, reflecting on the 5 Cs perhaps, and what you think in looking at those different components, what have been the key roadblocks in your country context to advancing this transformation?
Well, thank you, Juliet, and thanks for OECD, and thank you for the UNESCO team just being here with you, and among them, Zohra, Joel, and William, and thank you all. Well, considering the time, it will be like a very small time just talking about the journey since it started like 2017 of trying revamping the education system in terms of talking more to the digital natives, where the students right now are Generation Alpha and Generation Z generation. So they are totally have a different learning style and learning process. And there will a lot of problems, historical problems being accumulated in the education system. As we all know that it is a very complex system, education, when you try to transform things up, and it's all about people. I'll borrow the words you say, transformation is about the people. To have like the sector in a glance, our population right now is like more than 100 million, and 34% of under the age of 14. So we have 60,000 schools and 25 million students right now in the school system. And we have 1.6 teachers and administration. So, and there are some problems. I need to say the challenge first that we have the learning space problem where an overpopulated, we have, and I think it's a problem that there's overpopulated in some area, and there is no place, a learning space in specific areas. And we start doing in all the direction, try to renovate things. And we found that technology, it's very important, not only for just overcoming those type of problems, but in order just to equip the students with the 21st century skills. So we start by the content, saying that we have the vision and the will and the political will of transforming the education. We start with revamping the ecosystem. In turn, we started with doing a new curriculum framework, a new blueprint for what we would like the 2030 graduate from the school system to be in the 21st century skills. So we bring all the experts on the table, just having like a clean sheet of the new curriculum framework. Right now, they are in grade 6. We started this in 2017. First content with framework, and the framework for the curriculum was on 2018, K1, 2, and 3, and then added year by year. And we equipped the students with all the material that need to engage them into a learning, the fun in the learning, not to memorize things, but just to think and engage them in a practice and active learning. In grades 10, 11, and 12, we changed the mindset of the memorizing in terms of the filling exam, because all the students work in having like a certificate, and the certificate is the objective, not the learning itself. So we changed the ecosystem of the testing platform and the examination platforms. We use technology at a lot of having like a question banks and distributed tablets for the students. Right now, in the four years in a row, this year is the 5th year of having devices distributed to all the grade 10, 11, and 12 students, and they do exams on the tablet using the platform that we populated in 2,500 schools. We equip the classrooms with the technology where we have active panels, whiteboards connected to the data centers in order to consume the content. Where we have another project which is called the Egyptian Knowledge Bank. So this Egyptian Knowledge Bank, it's like a mega repository, started 2015 and launched 2016, of having a content repository from all the providers, tailored to and curated for the Egyptian curriculum in the K-12 part. The student have the devices just to access this inside the classroom or outside the classroom, where we equip the students with the connectivity for grade 10 and 11. So the experience was very challenging in terms of the culture, the connectivity, and the access part. But it's all a lot of problem of availing the content, availing the opportunity of the learn, and it gives like a hope for the students to have like different opportunity, despite where is the student in the social class. Because as we know that it is very important to know that technology might be very hard to avail for poor area, because they couldn't afford. So this is from our side as a government. We distributed this for free for them to have like an equal opportunity for all of the students. Then in order just to manage all these things up, we need to have like a very sustainable and controlled center for managing all the systems and managing the data are coming up from the 10, 11, 12. Right now, we distributed the devices for teachers as well, in order just to equip the teacher with the tool that is capable of being the pivot of because we know that it's I'll borrow again the same word that you talk about, Juliet, which is people is the main cornerstone for the transformation, because it's all about people. Transformation is all about people. So the teacher is a very pivotal point in order to fulfill and fill in this gap. But technology helped a lot in trying to have one teacher could fill in 2 or 3 or 4 classes. When we get the best teachers and get them to have like a TV episodes where we use the satellite TV channels in order just to have a formal TV based content and lessons delivered to the classrooms. So and when we hit by COVID, it was like the marvel that we have a good opportunity of bypassing these problems. When I go back to cover the seas, it was like we have a goal, which is we have a vision, and then we engineered the finance of trying to have this domestic and with the help of the World Bank in the project of the reforming, and then where we devised the content for K-12, where we have the platforms, and then the connectivity, which is right now in the part of covering grade 10, 11, and 12, and availing the content for the students or the parents who could able to jump in and have an access through their home. So I think that covering 5 minutes or 6 minutes won't cover the journey, but it's like a nutshell what we did in this arena.
Absolutely.
Over
Thank
to you, Juliet.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daher. I think that was a really comprehensive look at sort of all of the moving parts along these 5 Cs. I want to zoom into the connectivity one because, as you mentioned, Egypt is dealing with a big student population. I think it's around 25 million students, and you have upwards of 60,000 schools. And you mentioned that there's perhaps an urban-rural divide, let's say, in terms of connectivity. And I know that from the content perspective, it's been really important to also develop sort of online, offline compatibility with content. But in your plan, you mentioned that 11th and 12th grade, I believe, are sort of the focus area for this first round of connectivity. And I wonder if I could pass to Zora. Do you think that these challenges perhaps in sort of holistically covering the entire student population in an entire country that is so large with such urban rural divides perhaps in terms of population density, is that a challenge that's seen elsewhere, and how have those challenges been addressed?
Yeah, thank you, Juliette, and thank you for the OECD for the invitation. Delighted to be participating to this panel. So to get right to the point, as you're rightly saying, access to quality connectivity remains really the backbone of any digital transformation, but it's a hard one to achieve. Achieving access to high-speed, high-quality internet to all learners and educators wherever they are, it's a challenge. So breaking down the challenge actually to providing it at least to the schools is already in itself a big issue that most governments are still facing to basically, and having difficulties to address given the geographical spread often of the schools. So for instance, one of the major issues that is faced is what we call the last mile connectivity. So basically bringing the internet infrastructure to, you could say, rather larger agglomerations. But when it comes to bringing the access to every individual wherever they are, particularly in remote areas, that is not a cost-effective model for most internet providers. So there is a lack of investment to secure that this infrastructure is actually reaching every individual. Now, as rightly stated by the OECD Digital Education Outlook 2023 report, just providing digital devices and good connectivity will not lead in itself to digital improvement of education, but it is one of the major issues that governments are still facing. And maybe to give you a little bit of sense of the scale of the problem, I would say. So where is the world at today when it comes to these aspects? The UN-led GIGA project, which has as a goal to connect all the schools around the world. And you can consider the schools as the first mean to bring internet access to all learners and educators. Ideally, you want to bring it to their homes, but if we could at least start with the schools. So this program has so far mapped the connectivity status of more than 300,000 schools around the globe. Totally, there is an estimate of approximately 6 million schools around the globe. And they found out that in this estimation, half of the schools were not connected to the internet. Now, as per the latest Global Education Monitoring Report, it is estimated that 1 in 4 primary schools that not have access to electricity, which is a prerequisite to actually setting up any technology in the school. And the share of schools with computers for pedagogical purposes is around 47% for the primary schools, 62% among lower secondary schools, and 76% among the upper secondary schools. That's per the statistics of 2020. So I would say the pandemic has, if you want, highlighted even more the digital divide when it comes at least to the access. We are not talking, I think my colleagues here on the call will be talking also about the skills, but if we are only talking about the access to the physical infrastructure. During the pandemic, about 30% of the students, which is about 500 million students, weren't reachable because they didn't have access to technology. And we also noticed that online platforms that were leveraged to connect the learners during the pandemic could at best reach a quarter of the children. And speaking about the digital divide that you mentioned, Juliette, the communities that are most affected are in sub-Saharan Africa, as an example, where we see a much starker kind of divide there. And maybe to close my point, I would say that at the core of the transformation, we find the need for strong and smart policies that would relate also to the financing and the procurement, as is also related on the report that OECD has just published. So what we've seen in the latest data is that initial investment in education technology has been estimated to cover pretty much a quarter of the need around the globe today to be able to digitize education. So in essence, to be able to achieve the provision of electricity, internet, software, hardware for all the schools, the teachers and students, there is really a need for strong investment decisions supported by good procurement processes, I would say. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Zora. And I would add data in there as well. That was a really interesting finding from the Global Education Monitoring Report. The cost of data that is really feeding all of these processes is actually growing exponentially. And so it's often forgotten because I think we focus a lot on the costing of that hardware element. And I guess on the hardware element, I'd like to go to William to not only talk a little bit about the other side, because if we're thinking of connectivity and internet access and electricity, but then also what are the challenges in terms of actual sort of devices? And then on top of that, skilling to be able to use those devices. And do any of your experiences with Google reflect some of the challenges that Dr. Daher was mentioning in his presentation in Egypt? Over to you, William.
Sorry, I think I was muted for a second there. Thank you, Juliet. And thank you for focusing me, because I wanted to build upon some of the points that Zora made. So maybe if you'll allow me, I'll do that first and then come back to your question. I think you're absolutely right, Zora, and you covered, I think, almost all 5 of the C's in your introduction, Zora. But the one I wanted to hone in on, maybe 2 of them, is connectivity. I think what we oftentimes see is that there has been, I think, a pretty steady and dramatic improvement in connectivity to schools in I'll call it kind of the developing world, and forgive me if that's inappropriate or anybody considers that offensive. But in the countries that are lagging behind in terms of technology investments for education, let me put it that way, we see that there's been big advancements in connectivity to schools. But what we oftentimes see is that the investment in Wi-Fi inside the school is lacking. And we believe, of course, this is centric to Google's view. We believe that providing access to internet resources in the school needs to be part of any sustainable digital education transformation. And to do so, you need to have adequate Wi-Fi coverage in schools. So it's, I think, I don't know what you call that, Zora. I think it's beyond the last mile. It's the last 500 feet, maybe. That probably needs some additional investment. So oftentimes we see countries kind of fall short on that end, but we see steady improvement there. Then, I think I'd want to reflect on content and speak about that rather broadly. We, going back to what I said a minute ago, we believe in the importance of access to internet-based resources. There's just so many valuable educational resources, content, and other tools, which kind of blur the line between infrastructure and content that are available on the internet. And we think a strategy that actually opens up students and teachers to be able to access those vast resources is vital, again, for sustainability. I think too often what we see is countries investing a vast amount of resources in developing bespoke tools and resources for their curriculum in their country. And frankly, I think many countries are reinventing the wheel there, and they'd be better served if they opened up to a broader array of resources that are widely available, and oftentimes, if not often, for free. So I think these are 2 areas that I'd focus on. You asked me about devices, so I'll comment on that. Of course, we have a rather myopic view on this as well. We developed something called the Chrome operating system and launched it about 10 or 11 years ago. And frankly, we didn't expect it to become a popular operating system in the education sector. But lo and behold, starting in America and then growing to about 15 countries, so far, Chromebooks became the #1 selling device in the education sector. And really, I've never seen such a rapid transition. If you think about it, it was at the time when iPads were very, very popular in public schools in America. Chromebooks came out, and within 3 years, Chromebooks were the #1 selling device. So why is that? There's a couple of drivers. First and foremost, the versatility of these devices based on the ability to be able to manage them at scale and actually provision the devices for age-appropriate usage. So you're able to granularly set settings from a central administrative console on the devices so that students can only access the content and resources that they should be able to access, age-appropriate, appropriate materials relative to their age. So that's super, super important. And from the beginning, we designed these devices, which are basically cloud devices. So they don't store any content on them locally. So they become very scalable, very shareable, which is super important. It allows countries, frankly, to be able to move to a model where every student has access to a device without necessarily every student having to own a device. I think too often countries think that they have to, move in the direction that many rich countries have done, frankly, where they've gone to one-to-one computing, where they've provided technology for every student. And frankly, I think what's more important is to provide a device that's shareable and versatile enough and secure enough in a school context that they can be shared very easily between students. So that's something to think about on the device front. So I have so many more thoughts that I could share, but I think I'll pause there in the interest of time.
Thanks very much, William. And I think, as you said, your answer also was touching on many of the 5 C's. And I think that we're getting a much broader picture of what we're really talking about when we're talking about connectivity. I really appreciated what you said about, you can bring the Wi-Fi to the school, but then what happens inside the school, what's happening at the classroom level. And we know that extra mile, as Zora was saying, is actually probably one of the hardest parts. And then once you're in that classroom, are the devices flexible enough to be able to support different pedagogical models, learner-centered models of interactivity? So thank you very much for that. I think maybe the element we haven't touched on as much yet is, again, the people aspect of this. So I'd love to pass to Joël, who I know has quite a lot of experience in the training area. So if you have any reflections on the capacity and culture C and the importance of mindset and shift and skills, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. And yes, effectively, I was thinking exactly the same, how important is people, and particularly how important is to enable educators to be able to work with these technologies and to lead these projects. And the project we work quite intensively with UNESCO in the Caribbean was a project to train 10,000 teachers, starting during the pandemic in online learning. And itself, that project involved a bit of the 5 C's, of course, because at the scale of a project, 10,000 teachers with 20 member states in the Caribbean and 4 partners, because we were working with Anthology Blackboard at the moment, but also UNICEF and the University of West Indies in the Caribbean, made the capacity building involves also coordination, leadership, the constants and sustainability and all the things. But I think what was important and key in terms of the success of a project was understanding how important was to collaborate with all these partners locally, and how much important was the focus on sustainability for the project. So we could have try to do a short training for 10,000 teachers and say, okay, we tick the boxes, those teachers are trained and leave. But the focus of the project was more on building capacity, and we work in kind of what you could call a cascade model, and focus much more on empowering and enabling 50 what we call master trainers across the 20 member states, and making sure that those master trainers were part of a network that could continue working after we finish the projects. And so those master trainers trained those 10,000 teachers, but most of the focus, the effort was in making sure these trainers become a network that could continue working after. And there was also a component of content and curriculum there, because we came with a course that was already built, an online course that all teachers could access online. And we thought the course covered all the content that was needed. And while we started working with these master trainers, we learned that curriculum of that course needed to be adapted and needed to change to respond to the local needs of the 20 member states. And basically, until that was really owned by the master trainers and transformed, we kind of struggled to be successful with the training of the 10,000 teachers. So I think that's also important. And we managed, I actually ended up changing the certification model a bit too, based on the feedback that we received from the member states and the trainers. So I think, it's the training component, but it's how that training component is also sustainable and how integrates the content and the curriculum that is important for the region you're working on.
Absolutely. And I think that illustrates again that it's difficult to silo each of the C's because there really are interlinkages between all of them. And I'd like to just establish the fact that a lot of the problems that we've talked about right now are global challenges. But when we zoom back to the coordination and leadership C, I'll pass back to Dr. Daher here. And I think reflecting on the sort of global context and the examples that Joelle, Zora, and William have shared, Dr. Daher, when you look at the 5 C's framework, do you see a sort of priority area that you have identified as being one of the key enablers for progress, not only along digital maturity and education, but more broadly, how digital technology can be leveraged to achieve the broader education goals of the education sector?
Sorry, I was mute. Well, thanks, Juliet. Well, just commenting on the DTC efforts, because it's all about sustainability and engaging more real value. So the priority here is, as my colleague said, it's not about having devices and the last mile connectivity. It's about the sustainability and the operation of such things, the mix-up, the digital mindset, the training needed and the culture needed for start things up. So it's very important just to have like a clear roadmap with the phases, and it should be agile, because education itself, it's in this age, it's moving, it's shaping, it's different every day. So we need to be agile. So this is the main important things that the DTC is bringing, is the partnership, the finance ideas of trying to enable the different aspects. So when we are looking back to Egypt and about the plans, because we have a digital transformation plan, and it's very important for the DTC just to confirm that we are on the standard, because as William said, it's very important just not to only have a content, that the content is access and free, and you can use it. No need to develop more content. You can use it from different, maybe a country organization, and it's available for free. The same as the device part. So we can share devices, we can change devices, and digital divide is one of the major problems that we could face. So thanks for the availability of the connectivity, availability of the good financing, the structure financing, and the roadmap the DTC could bring on, that we could help us of overcoming such problems. So I see the key of the enabler is about the partnership and the people. So availing a good partners and with a sustainable plan and a good processes, then I think that this is the most important part, looking over for this engagement. Over to you, Juliet.
Thank you, Dr. Daher. I think that again gets to the sort of central ethos of the DTC and the reason for its existence. I would like to ask that same question then to the partners. So maybe perhaps first to Joël. How do you think that the idea of multi-stakeholder partnership being one of the key enablers of progress along all 5 of these Cs has been realized? How have you seen these types of partnerships result in true sort of impact-driven transformation in education that leverages digital technology?
Thank you, Juliet. Yeah, and I absolutely agree with the partnership and people statement. And yeah, in this same project in the Caribbean, I think the role of each one of partners, the coordination was key. One of the important partners was the University of West Indies. So the Caribbean Center for Educational Planning there, the fact that it's a partner that could continue working in knowledge transfer and working with this group really was key for the sustainability, and also gave the project more credibility because the course was built by our company, which is an educational technology company, and having a partnership with a local university was key in terms of credibility and certification also, which is an important component for teachers. But also the local office in UNESCO and the work that the local office in UNESCO did with each one of the member states, involving those member states in each one of the important decisions of the project was key, because really coordinating the needs of these states that were very different and making sure that they participate in a equal manner, because some of them were much more close to are much more in a sense much more powerful, and they made sure that balance was there and everyone was heard. And I think finally this group of facilitators, so this first group of master trainers, became actually part of that coordination process and part of almost as advisory committee for the project, and that was also key in the success of the project. So I think one of the questions that I was thinking about, is there another C? I think the fact that C, that that group coordinating the project became almost a group of friends, and really trust and camaraderie was built there, is also important, because with this type of collaborations it's really difficult sometimes to not to try to like selfish feelings become important. So really, I think, yeah, definitely each one of the partners had a role. We as Anthology, as a company, I think we provide only the technology, the infrastructure, and the course content, but everyone else made this project successful.
Great. Yeah, again, I think coming back to that lighthouse aspect of coordination being at the top of the 5 Cs being so significant. And that's why, again, when we have a maturity model and a questionnaire and an assessment tool for these 5 Cs, and we focus on that aspect of coordination and leadership first, because we do believe that it's really, really important. And you mentioned partnerships with academia, partnerships with intergovernmental organizations, and of course, partnerships with the government, because the countries are really in the driver's seat of all of these initiatives. And Zora, perhaps maybe I can pass to you again for the same question.
Thanks, Juliette. I will probably piggyback on what the colleagues on the line have shared so far. So, for instance, from Dr. Daher, the focus on having an agile approach to partnership, I think, is essential here, is what has helped us, Ericsson, see results on the ground. So, for instance, I would say we've been working for the past few years on, while one of the first focus is to make sure learners are connected, we never bring connectivity without thinking about how it is being used. So we've been focusing a lot on the digital skills. So it's not only about technology, for learning, but learning about technology, in essence, if I can reverse it. So how do we learn about technology in itself as a skill that can help? In this case, I would focus more on improving employment prospects, you could say. So when you think about the aspect of digital skills in the work environment, we realize that it affects a large portion of the socioeconomic spectrum, really. So we find needs across the full spectrum. So we've been working with NGOs, at grassroots level, as well as with governments, when it comes to upskilling, let's say, university students, who you could consider in this context, relatively more privileged than the, for instance, out-of-school communities. So in the work we've done, for instance, across sub-Saharan Africa or in India with the non-governmental organizations in community learning centers to upskill young people who are out of work, out of school, the focus has been very much how to make sure that they get the basic digital skills or intermediate skills, how to use the technology responsibly, but really have these basic skills that are needed pretty much today in every job that you may be applying for. So we've been working with these communities. Often they are young people from migrant communities or from rural areas where there is a limited set of, you could say, opportunities. So it's about improving their opportunities for a job, or helping them get the skills to create these opportunities by creating their own businesses, in essence. And often these efforts that we have with these NGOs on the ground are combined, and it's important, I think, with a plan for job placement. How do we make sure that we are not just providing skills, but we are providing them with a purpose? So working with local industries to understand the needs on the ground and see how we can connect also the learners to those jobs. Now, talking about, if I move maybe to the other side of the spectrum, you could say, and here working more in collaboration with governments, we've been looking into how can we support ministries of education, ministries of higher education, for instance, in addressing the skill gap, basically by contributing. We believe that the industry and companies like ours can provide practical training for students to map the skill gap that we see today in the industries, from the academic sector. So for instance, in Malaysia, we worked with the Ministry of Higher Education to develop a new program that upskills all university students on digital services. So it's an online course that was developed in partnership with the local university technology experts in Malaysia. And it's provided now, it's been open to all universities. So there are about, I think, a little more than 120 universities onboarded so far. So the ministry takes the responsibility to really onboard the universities. And the ambition is that this is aligned with the government's plan to deploy 5G across the country, so that the government has a coherent policy if they are deploying, let's say, a new communications network like 5G, that the communities are also being upskilled to understand the benefits of that technology, how they can leverage it, and how they can contribute to it. So that's one of the aspects where we've seen a successful cross-sectoral partnership to hopefully achieve scale. Thank you, Juliette.
Thank you so much, Zora. I think that really well illustrates the multi-levels of these cross-sectoral partnerships that are necessary. And thank you for pointing out as well the partnerships with NGOs at the local level, and those being a really sort of key enabler of the progress along this area. And I think, William, we've mentioned quite a lot of different types of partnerships, but I wonder, have we missed any? Do any of these resonate with your experiences as well?
Well, thanks, Joel and Zora, for sharing your experiences. And I think Zora touched on it a little bit. I think what we've seen work is really kind of a multi-stakeholder approach within the country. So multiple ministries, in most cases, have to come together to bring about this transformation. These are not, small undertakings, and Dr. Daher has lived it, so he knows what I'm talking about. These are multi-year, multiple stakeholders, lots of complexity, high stakes outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And you can't undertake such programs. These are major programs. You can't undertake such programs without involving stakeholders from multiple different ministries. I can think of what I think is a very good example, maybe one of the best examples that I've seen to date in the world. It's not one that the DTC has supported, and it's not in the Global South. It's Japan, and you might think of Japan as being, a technologically advanced country, and in many ways it is. But in fact, until about 5 years ago, Japan had a very, very low use of technology in education. They undertook a program which actually had its genesis not from the Ministry of Education, but from what was called the digital agency that was created, which was basically formed to kind of connect ministries from across the government against a societal aim of improving digital literacy and digital skills in the overall society. And from that, education was kind of a subcomponent, if you will. And the subcomponent under, that formed around education became known as the GIGA Project. And the GIGA Project had as its mission a society, and I love this, I had to write it down to make sure I got it right, a society where anybody, anytime, and place can learn with anybody in his or her own way. And that was basically the mission and the guidance that they provided to the sector. And then from there, the specifications of all the various different pieces. And when we talk about infrastructure, and the OECD report just out actually goes into great detail on a lot of these different components: student information systems, learning management systems, content management systems, open education resources. All of these things, there's multiple different paths. Some countries, as I mentioned earlier, tend to think that they should build their own for a variety of reasons, and other countries go through, a process of having a much more open ecosystem and just providing guidance. What I liked about Japan is they provided this guidance. They created procurement frameworks that were very inclusive. So they allowed prefectures and municipalities to choose the technologies that they felt were appropriate for their locales. All right. But again, it comes down to you have to have multi-sectoral, multi-ministry support and stakeholders buying in to support this. You need the Ministry of Finance to understand the benefit to the economy so that they include budget to be able to do procurements over the course of the ensuing years. So Japan undertook this transformation very rapidly. It was accelerated during COVID. But just to give you some information, in 2020, only about 48% of their schools had internet connectivity. 2 years later, 98% of them did. Okay, and that was all self-funded. They went from almost no usage of computers in classrooms, Dr. Daher, to a one-to-one model. Every student in the country has access to a computer now. Now, again, I'm not advocating that's the right model for everybody, but I think the pace of change in Japan is remarkable. And more importantly, I think what we're seeing and what we're hearing anecdotally, we don't have empirical evidence to show this yet, but what we're seeing and hearing is that there's a strong correlation, and we see this not only in Japan, but in other places. There's a strong correlation where technology is used a little bit more than a tool. I don't really like the word tool because it sounds kind of limiting, right? But technology is really being used to unlock, and you said it very eloquently a few minutes ago, Juliet, I want to borrow that from you, to change pedagogical approaches. I don't think those are your exact words, but that's the essence of it. And that's what we see. We see a strong correlation between technology adoption in schools, in classroom. Yes, for sure. Also for people to be able to use anywhere, as the Japan mission was, with anybody from home or wherever they want to learn and with whomever they want to learn. But when technology is used in the classroom, we see innovative teaching practices emerge. And I think ultimately, this is the challenge that most ministries are facing. How do they modernize the practice of teaching for today's times, right? How do we modernize the practice of teaching to produce students that have the skills that they need to have in order to be productive members of our society? And I think we all acknowledge that the 100-year-old model of the sage on the stage is not adequate anymore. So technology plays a role. Then I know I'm getting off the subject of your question, but I think I wanted to share that with you for context. But going back to what I said, I think it's super important, and I think we have this in Egypt, and I look forward to meeting you, Dr. Daher, this coming weekend. But I think involving ministries, different ministries that have a stake in this. Is super important for success in the long run, as it is with any major program.
Thank you so much, William. And I think that we've made quite a nice journey, starting with coordination and leadership around the 5C circle and back to coordination and leadership, and really focusing on this idea that digital transformation is about the people and it's about the partnerships. And in order to create those partnerships, we need to have strong relationships and trust, which is really the essence of what the DTC is doing. It's building these both global and local collaborative platforms for us to work with governments as in one voice, as a group of partners to advance national visions for digital transformation in education. So with that, I know we have about 2 minutes left before we have to wrap up, and I would like to finally pass the concluding word to Boren Shakrun, who has really steered a lot of this DTC vision from the start. So over to you, Boren.
Thank you, Juliette. And first, thanks to OECD colleagues who offered us this opportunity to share the work we are doing, also to have colleagues joining us. Thanks to Dr. Dar, to William, to Zora, to Joel for their contribution and the experience and all the expertise that we gained and all bringing it together in the DTC. Thanks to you, Juliette, for the moderation, as usual, very eloquent and very, I would say, high quality moderation. We spoke about the 5 C's with the data at the center. I would like to finish our discussion with the 5 golden rules that comes from the discussion. One is obviously what William was mentioning right now is partnership, collaboration, whole of government approach. I think that's very, very important golden rule. The second golden rule is about, again, William was mentioning that, but it comes in different interventions, not to reinvent the wheel, but policy learning from the experience, use the resources that exist and build on them, rather than trying to invest from scratch. That takes time, that takes a lot of money, and obviously you need the efficiency. The third golden rule is the 5 C's are a system of action, but you need to have, I would say, a lenses approach, meaning you may zoom on teacher training, you may zoom on infrastructure, but you need to keep the system dimension in your approach and the way you engage. The fourth, I think, is coming from our discussion that the teaching and learning dimension and the pedagogy is important, and that comes first. It's not the technology that comes first, it's the teaching and learning process that is very important. And the last golden rule, I think Zora was very clear about it, is that it's not only about academic achievement. The transformation is also about the outcomes in terms of skills development, in terms of opportunity for employment, for economic growth, inclusive growth, and obviously equity and inclusion at the center of that, because that's what I think should drive any effort of education transformation. So thanks to colleagues. I know that OECD colleagues are asking us to finish early. Thanks to you, Juliette, and thanks again to all colleagues who joined us. And please look at the DTC, reach out for additional exchange, and all colleagues, Dr. Dar, William, Zora, and Joel, are at disposal as well for engagement. Thank you very much. Thanks to you, Juliette.
Thank you.
Yes, I would say that everyone comes in when I mention their name.
Okay.
You can see all speakers, and then when I give the floor to Quentin, it's only him.
Okay, perfect. So let's wait 2 minutes because we are it's 10:58. Simon, has the previous session ended?